Hello everybody, welcome back to a new YouTube video. It has been a while since we have made one. I have been pretty busy recently, and also haven't really had motivation to make these types of videos. Last week I was in Missouri, so that took a lot of time. Didn't have service at all over there, so yeah. I did do a storm chase recently, and you can check that out. It is the featured video on my channel right here. I went on June 25th. I went storm chasing a little bit south of me, and I saw some nice stuff, including a shelf cloud, so you should check that out. Now today we're going to be mainly talking about the severe weather through the 3 through 8 day range, but I will touch on the 1 through 2 day range on the SBC site. We currently have 2 severe thunderstorm watches up, one in North Dakota, Wyoming, and South Dakota, and another one in North Dakota, Minnesota. I meant Nebraska, sorry. North Dakota, Minnesota, and South Dakota. For these watches here, this watch primary threats are damaging winds upwards to 80 mile per hour and isolated hail. This one, isolated hail up to 1 inch and damaging wind gusts up to 80 mile per hour. Those are the primary threats for both of the watches. We don't have any new missile skills discussions out yet. So, yeah, but we currently have some linear segments ongoing across the area. Now, over the next few days here, we'll look into the pattern with the WRAP model. So here's a look at 500 right now. There was a big time tornado that happened in Canada earlier, or landspout tornado kind of hybrid type thing. It happened in like this region of, I think that's Saskatchewan. Pretty major tornado, or tornado slash landspout. Looked very cool. You see that shortwave kind of ejecting in there. We're expecting some late night hailers tonight across the Dakotas as another little embedded shortwave moves into the area. Tomorrow across Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nebraska, there's going to be a chance for severe weather with kind of this embedded shortwave. And we could take a zoomed in look at that area and look at it pretty briefly. Look at the northern Great Plains. That'll be giving us a perfect sector at that. We also go over to this screen. The Storm Prediction Center has issued a marginal risk with a 2% tornado, 5 wind, and 5 hail, and there's a mention of a slight risk. So here's a look kind of going in here. Well, here's a look at our mean or mixed layer cape. We can see we have an area that does get uncapped. It's just kind of coverage concerns here. The WRAP kind of wants to uncap that area. If we look at the general precip look, and we do see a few storms fire. We have a little convergence area there. That fires off, tries to fire off some storms there. And we have a sounding that is very supportive for long-lived supercells capable of large hail production. So I think large to very large hail production could be a possibility for tomorrow. I mean, and also some damaging wind gusts. Your wind shear is rather unidirectional, as seen here. It's pretty much just to the west. And we also have steep lapse rates and good keep to support hail and wind potential. Tornado potential seems rather low given really not much 3 cape, the more dry air at the surface, and the lack of low-level shear and low-level turning. We can take another sounding in an area with better 3 cape, which is going to be northern Wisconsin. That is why there is a small tornado risk up there tomorrow. Take another one too. So here is this sounding. Now this sounding is mainly going to be vorticity fed. There is not really much going on with this photograph that would support tornadic type storms. This is like that, I don't know, it's a weird photograph shape. Right? It's kind of like a Gretchen J-shaped photograph, which would support more splitting storms. You have a little bit of low-level shear that's present, but not much. So I think you could get a couple landspout type tornadoes tomorrow. Along the 3 cape and vorticity max, which is present across North Dakota, or I mean, not North Dakota, Minnesota and Wisconsin there. But there's not much low-level shear support to support tornadoes. So I think hail and wind will remain the primary threats, and I think we'll probably see a 15% hail, possibly significant, being added in the future. Now let's go to 500 millibar and kind of forward it more. We see this system kind of move into the Canada region, but then it kind of ejects back into the northeast, and then we see another system kind of develop over Kansas. So this is Friday, July 1st. Severe weather is going to be possible in multiple areas. We have one area that's severe weather is going to be possible, and it's kind of Nebraska, all the way through the Ohio Valley and back into the northeast. Here there's going to be kind of multiple waves of it. There's a boundary in play, a lot of cape. Some areas have higher shear, like Kansas, but other areas have a lot lower shear. There's going to be another area to watch, kind of in this general region in the Black Hills, maybe dipping back into Colorado with those subtle short waves. That region looks quite interesting as well. We look at the 500 millibar vorticity. We can see there's also a region to watch as this tropical entity kind of gets into Louisiana there. There is potential that this does develop into a very weak tropical cyclone before making landfall. We can see on the NHC page that this thing has a 40% chance of developing within the next 48 hours, as it's probably going to make landfall soon. We have also potential tropical cyclone 2. It is expected to form very shortly, and then we have another tropical cyclone, or potential tropical storm to form here. Only a 20% chance on that one. So we can see that the wrap kind of really gets this organized as it makes landfall. So maybe a weak depression or a weak tropical storm as it makes landfall. And we can see it turns into a big-time vortex. Now, if we zoom into this area, we may see a brief and weak tornado threat with this, as we have a lot of 3 Cape that is getting infected in front of the system. We can take a sounding kind of on the northeast quadrant of the system to look at how it might be. And it's very moist throughout the profile, and there's a very big lack of shear right here. And the lap strips are not very steep, but I do think this could get it done for maybe like a brief bird fart tornado because of that low level curvature. Be a very messy storm system. Not a very good threat at all. Maybe as the day goes on, the threat gets a little better as you get more 3 Cape and instability to kind of meander around. Let's see. That is a little bit better. There's a lot higher level of lap shifts in the sounding. I'm going to see if Mixer Cape gets any better. It's a bit better as we get toward the middle of the day. Maybe something like here would do something. But that is not terrible. I mean, it's pretty bad, but it's not as bad as the other sounding. This is just straight up terrible. There's literally no low-level shear with that sounding. So that's not going to get you anywhere. But besides this point, this is going to bring in gusty winds, heavy rain, maybe a brief bird fart, spin-up type tornado. Rain, there could be a lot of rain with this system. It's not going to show you the total amount, but there's some areas that the wrap projects to have like almost 12 inches of rain, which is quite high. So be on the lookout for that. Now moving into the contiguous US again, so we can look at 500 millibar. We can see that there's a large kind of ridge that's going to be centered across the southeast United States right here. And kind of riding the ridge are these embedded features of waves with an upper level system up in Canada here. We can see there's going to be multiple areas to watch. The Northeast is one of them, and back into the Great Lakes states. Now the Central Plains is another one, and then the Black Hills is another one. So there's going to be a few areas to watch. Now looking at the instability for the whole CONUS, we'll go to like 21Z. We'll go 21Z. There's a lot of areas that have decent instability. Portions of the Northeast have good instability. Up in Maine, back in the Black Hills, through the Central Plains, and into the Midwest there's an area. There's another area right here. So there's going to be multiple focuses of storms, and I think we could see one or more marginals get added in account for this. Looking at 700 millibar, we can kind of see our embedded features, and we have an embedded little pulse of energy that comes from, that starts in Kansas and kind of meanders its way eastward into Illinois, Missouri, and Iowa. We have a pretty good area of energy out here. This is with our upper level system associated in Canada. Now zooming in, we're going to talk about the Black Hills region first. As we get a little bit later in the day, your 3 Cape starts to get a lot higher across this region as an inversion weakens. We do take a forecast sounding kind of in that 3 Cape slash vorticity max. There's a little 3 Cape vorticity max here. Lots of low level instability available. Pretty good long straight photographs that would definitely support large hail potential with this system. We also have the low levels being a bit more dry, which would also support that. So this would be an interesting forecast. Now, looking into the kind of the vorticity, there's a lot of vorticity maxes that are going to probably initiate storms in here and over here in the Black Hills and kind of in here. Multiple focus zones and even into Canada there. We could check this focus zone right here, kind of in southern Montana. And within this focus region, we can see there is extremely steep low-level lapse rates and the mid-level lapse rates until you hit the EL. So I think we could see some hail with this. Deep layer shear and a long straight photograph definitely supports the hail potential as well. It's just going to be quite low top as it's in a mountain. Now I feel like the mountains kind of enhance the vorticity as well because they're kind of just sitting there all day. The vorticity like that just sits there because of like some of the mountainous terrain over there. But it's also there due to the fact that there is a system in that area. Now moving into the Central Plains, here we see right around 21Z. There's going to be potential for some strong storms to start to develop. You have your instability that starts to get a little bit more uncapped across Kansas here. Probably where your severe weather would be. Maybe we'll start off at 19Z actually. So this is not very favorable for tornadoes, but it's very, very favorable for wind and hail, I would say. Same with that sounding. It's very favorable, especially for both wind and hail. Very dry at the surface, which would support wind potential, but it's dry enough also to support hail potential. But the photograph would probably more support damaging winds. This is gonna be an alright sounding. There's a bit of an inversion there at 700, which would prevent more significant amounts of storms. Looking at 850, we don't really have much low-level shear across this region until it gets to around 21 or to around 0Z. Once we get to 0Z, we can start to see a very strong inversion build in, but there is those mothership type profiles, so if we do have a supercell, we probably would have a very photogenic and beautiful supercell at that point. Another area to watch is Colorado. There's a Vort Maxes over here with some 3 Cape. We can click this Vorticity Max to kind of see what it looks like, but here's the first one. Not a very good sounding at all. Not much shear with that one. There could be an isolated downburst, though, given the amount of dry air at the surface with any storm. Maybe some isolated 50 to 60 mile/hour wind gusts, but the shear will make the storms collapse rather quickly. Now, we definitely have a notable theta E boundary, which would probably also potentially kick off some good storm development here. Looking into the Midwest, we can see that this is present. We can see that there's a good amount of mixed layer cape that's present across portions of Illinois and into Missouri there. Kicks off around 21Z and goes from there. There isn't too much shear above like 6-7 kilometers, but I feel like this would support an isolated severe storm or two. Look a little further north into the northern central Illinois region, and we can see another sounding that would mainly support damaging wind and hail production. There's more level of instability with the sounding, but the problem is that there's not much low-level shear. Moving into the northeast region, we can see that there is an area that does uncap a little bit earlier in the day, around 20 Zulu time, across portions of Connecticut and in Massachusetts there, but it stays rather capped throughout the rest of the day. Before it goes all uncapped, we have very steep low-level lapse rates and then very dry air in the mid-levels, so that would suppress storm activity. Now moving in a little bit later into the day, a forecast sounding from southwest Connecticut, we can see the air is not so dry in the mid-levels, but it's still not very good, so that would probably still suppress the activity a bit, given this huge difference of temperature at around 600 millibars right here. Hail growth layer is not big, so I don't think hail would be a problem. I think this would mainly be damaging winds because of how dry the surface is, but we can't rule out a tornado because there is some streamwise vorticity within the walls of the photograph, but it's more crosswise as you get away from the surface there. Further north into portions of Maine, another area of severe weather is possible. We have pretty good amounts of 3 Cape there. You have better low-level shear profiles. If you take a look at a sounding, we can see the cave profile is quite skinny, but the photograph is pretty big. Three cape values are decent. Your lapse rates at the surface are decent, but as you go a little bit above 4 kilometers there, they start to really drop off. Your storm relative velocity is pretty strong as well, so this would create a potential for an isolated tornado or two, and some isolated wind gusts maybe, but and maybe some isolated hail as well. Now, kind of moving on. Here's a look at the NAM 18Z1. We kind of see the same idea. We have that tropical entity that forms, and we have an embedded shortwave that kind of kicks in. Now, beyond that, as we get into Saturday, another round of storms is possible across the northeast states earlier into the day. Probably 15 to 18 Z is when they would have some potential for severe weather. And in the Black Hills, there's a system that traverses itself into portions of Montana, and the flow kind of kicks up a bit from that. So I feel like severe weather would be possible there. And then there's something kicking up across Missouri, Illinois, and Kansas. Looks like an embedded little shortwave region, or like a little MCV or shortwave impulse type thing running into a cape access. So that would be interesting to watch for severe potential as well. Looking into kind of the mixed dew point, pretty moist across most of the atmosphere. Looks like a front kind of crashes southward there, in the Midwest and Ohio Valley region. If we do take a look at the precipitation here, yeah, that is definitely the case. It's probably why we have that instability go away. There's a line of storms that kind of kicks up there. So if we look at that, not a very good sounding at all for severe activity. You have literally no shear, so don't look at that. But into North Dakota, we have an area of storms that kind of gets kicked up over there, and we have an embedded area of 500 millibore energy, so that's going to support hail too, mainly hail. We could see some damaging wind gusts as well, given the drier surface, and maybe a brief tornado because of the low level enlarged photograph, just a little bit, but I think tornado potential wouldn't be too great here. The 20 difference in the dew points would also kind of suppress this, but I think maybe a marginal area in the northern plains and maybe the northeast may be added for this. If we do zoom into the northeast region here, we can kind of look at the surface data E here at this point. We're going to take a sounding near Albany, up in central Mass there, and then like northeast Jersey. And here's the sounding that is near Albany. Pretty solid. Pretty good photograph there, pretty enlarged. And the low level lapse rates are decent, except as you get into the mid levels, it's not as good. It's pretty much the same with this one. And then this profile would be mainly a downburst type profile, as the drier air at the surface would kind of help with that. Not much of a tornado or hail risk with it either, because of the there would be a small hail risk, but not a big one. You can see here the hail would not be as prevalent with the sounding, because this is the layer that we watch for hail growth in, and it's not the thickest, and we also don't have very steep lapse rates above 3 to 6 kilometers as well. So that would be another factor. And your PWatt values are rather high too. Now looking a little bit further into the long range patterns here, we can see, looking at the precipitation type here, kind of move along here. Here's a look at the 3rd, July 3rd. We can see there's probably going to be some sort of severe weather up in the high plains there. If we look at 500 millibar, yep, there is a trough that ejects into the high plains, giving off severe potential. And here to areas like Montana. Mixler Cape is definitely favorable over there as well. We can look at the GFS here and take a sounding there in south central Montana. at 0Z, and we can look at how good that looks. Looking at that, it will favor some pretty significant downbursting winds and then some large hail as well. So probably a marginal to slight threat there. Upper level flow is pretty solid across that region as well, so that would help kind of promote the risk. Looking at your lower levels, doesn't look as great though. Now, as we go into the future here, see that system in the high plains kind of meanders around and kind of gets there. We have another embedded shortwave here in the Midwest regions. We have a high pressure here, and then we have kind of these storm systems that come from the west and kind of ride along it like this. So severe weather is going to be a pretty common occurrence probably within these regions over the next few weeks. Maybe some monsoon severe weather, so we'll put this area as like a maybe. But probably not. Probably just some shower and storm activity. But here's probably going to be the main severe risk activity over the next few weeks. Probably into here. Multiple opportunities for strong to severe storms. Looking into the 4th though, looking like severe weather is going to be possible across the high plains again and then maybe into the Midwest. Not for certain yet, but looking at the bulk shear composite here, it looks pretty high across the areas where we have some stronger instability. Looking at 850 millibar, it's pretty strong across Nebraska as well. Surface vorticity is rather strong as well across portions of Nebraska. So if we take a sounding here, and take a sounding ahead of the vorticity as well, there the soundings are awful. But if we take a sounding ahead of that, we can see a pretty good photograph, but rather capped. Into Iowa, though, we see it's uncapped, so that would probably mean we would have a higher chance for severe weather if we have enough forcing. Photographs are rather big there, which would support the potential. Dew points are pretty high, into the 70s. Vorticity there is not the best, but the vertical velocities and the vorticity at 500 millibar would support some sort of thunderstorm development. Your lid strength is not quite that high either, so you'd probably see some storm activity. Looking at convective precip, we start to get a little bit there in Nebraska as we go throughout the day. Yeah, so that'll definitely promote that. Kind of just looking at this loop overall here, we can see this ring of fire pattern really into play. Tuesday, looks like the high plains and then into the mid-Atlantic and Ohio Valley would see a severe threat again. Wednesday, looks like a pretty significant one if that would actually pan out for the Midwest and Ohio Valley there. Dew points, yeah, very high, into the upper 70s ahead of that shortwave kind of piece of energy that kind of sparks in Illinois. And yeah, that looks very damaging wind to me. Kind of see that piece of energy get shunted there. Lots of energy here. Good amounts of shear too, but as you get into the upper levels, your wind shear starts to die off. This is the high plains. The wind shear gets a lot stronger as you get within heights. That would probably create a decent severe threat as well. So it looks like the high plains into the Midwest, Ohio Valley, could see severe threat, maybe the Northeastern Ohio Valley as well over the next few days. Looks like another piece of energy kind of goes in there. Looks like we have a couple tropical cyclones form, and it kind of gets a little more kind of storm systems. Kind of cool how we just see the evolution of these troughs kind of just come across our screen, and then it gets a little bit more inactive. Well, yeah, that'll do it for this one. I'll just leave you out on a loop of our 500 millibar wind spike.